don't understand what you did. It was like that.
Wait, who was I supposed to put on first?
Left.
Can you put me on there?
Yeah.
What's up?
You still have my email?
What?
You still have my email on there?
Yeah, I have it. Wait, you're connected to
Email chain?
What? What's wrong?
There's 0 chance we don't pull the search. That's how we go.
Yeah.
How many sheets? You can flush it down.
Okay. So,
You know? Wait, what? Is that? Oh, okay.
That would have been bad. That was a different formative. But we don't have it in paper, so
We don't?
we're gonna send it out.
So I'll send that.
Luckily I didn't start reading that one.
okay, so you are in fact reading the correct one.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
right.
yes, but it's at least disclosed news, so it would have been better anyways. But,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Let me just see. Oh, it's not. I changed it. Are you good?
Not yet. Yeah, I'm good.
Oh, did you just connect? Are you sure? Your computer's not connected?
Hey, Georgia, you
It's
have a
okay.
flash drive?
I do not. My internet doesn't work either.
Someone need a hotspot?
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with that. I'm the one that's just kind of look at the docs anyways, so.
Does anyone have like a flash drive we can borrow?
Yeah.
Yes, did you get it?
I'm sorry?
Can you flash drive it?
Yeah.
Or,
Ethan's what also.
or do you
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Just make sure it's.
Here, do you have?
It's.
Okay, I'll put it on.
Oh.
Right,
We
yeah.
have
My
to do
my
this
flash
one.
drives on my computer are still whack. So. One second.
Oh, y'all are sending it out.
I sent it out, yeah.
Oh.
But we're gonna put it on. Is it? So I see 2 USB discs. Do we know which one it is? Here you go. Oh wait, I forgot to put the cap back on.
We'll let.
We'll hold it. Okay. Yeah.
Do you all want the flash drive?
I don't know. Look at it till after. So.
No, or good job.
Are your kids off? Are your kids
Oh,
off?
we're app, and I won the first flip I've literally after an 8-year career.
Did you disclose new or same? Oh.
Which
Wait,
is
I
fun.
flipped that.
Yeah, I called it.
You just talking about that in front of me?
Yeah. You disclosed new, it was your fault. We could have been egg if you disclosed the same thing.
I should have never touched that coin.
I don't agree at all. That's awesome.
Everybody got it?
Yeah.
All right. Talk.
And you're not good?
We always say at the Black Panther Party that they can do anything they want to us. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave, you remember I said, with the last words on my lips, I am a revolutionary. And you're going to have to keep on saying that. You're going to have to say that I am a proletarian. I am the people. I'm not the big. You got to make a distinction. And the people are going to have to attack the big. The people are going to have to stand up against the big. That's what the Panthers are doing. That's what the Panthers are doing all over the world.
We find ourselves in the midst of a race war. Classroom debates over immigration cannot be disassociated from the internal debate that substantial expansion of white humanity, of dedication of internal debate occurs in symbiosis with cultural, juridical, military statutes, social lines between people of color, with the future of the ascendancy of white being versus the anti-civilizational profile of black indigenous extremism. The illusion that we can play devil's advocate between liberal and conservative positions is the right out of the playbook of the alt-right misfies the race war. Their anxiety about the loss of a shared good life fuels recruitment into white supremacy. They intensifies alienation, modalities of genocide, brought to because 19th century global narratives of sectional race with who hate the white national formers and everywhere against all right evidence with narrative for racial progress, subject promise of post-one futurity for those who fit the seminal amenity profile, gendered, racial, domestic board, for all super likes, multicultural reserves, worst search and white and nationalism, law and order, and the infrastructure, tolerance, repression, are never finally several internal debate over balance of the white humanity offers mandatory favors against the urge to violently decline the inevitably suffering explodes of presumptuous white universally the world exists on mankind's turn. This is alienating the limits of the internal debate are the whether a potential expansion of its collective is capable of altering the intensity of capital state, the fabric, the Indian Negro, the alien. The problem is not desire for a protective capacity during redux, but rather the internal debate can only allow a consensus which sits on the democracies, placing the equitably reordering statecraft, owning productive capacities. Not only that, only that for only now, adjudication of internal debate occurs symbiosis and for the enforcement of cultural, juridical, mutual states that affirm the anti-civilizational profile to make the black and the rapper to accommodate outer, and all of it, the protest cast for words will somehow much touch the brutalized with teaching the process claims such objects of bodies in the body of citizenship and remind them we are not criminals. Delusion is willful, so we're always global war. Those who have been enslaved dominated the found power in the fight when the fiction of the shared good life fades, willingness to ensues. They know you are upset over disappointment or purpose you cannot see how you far you become few as you are being treated as fear. Supremacy is not only enforced from the genocide Lowe and cultural symbiotic and political apartheid and moves with sustainability towards the flexibility of racial how they convert an anti-racist form because the white being's descendants already assembles common sense as an invitation to fantasize people of color but the future within the ascendancy rebellions of the classroom buried insurgency among people who refuse to be willing to participate in the oppressive system. These do not rely on massive numbers. They pivot on the willingness of committed collectives to strategize social conditions. Such work has the capacity to accomplish everything from sparking revolutions. Everything must go. Every law room, every great house, every plantation, all that we must refuse the wolf tamer's banners or else we perfect the mark of slavery through the plantation of debate. Farley 5 1 over black slavery, new segregation, every distribution of material, spiritual goods, false and cloud progress is alive because slave for X is helping to blows up before its master because when it prepares for legal real and cultivates the law, hoping for an answer, taking away from slavery to see everything must go. Every law room, every house of plantation, all of the childhoods where it began. It already marked the market organized and differentiates our philosophy. The mark is race and gender. Our class of the mark is said to precede existence, property and law of all of the mark because white over black is a desire that enables us to find our place in institutional spaces. The slave is trained to be an object text of law, like the content of dream of wolves may be still be an uncertain story because the uncertainty story is no consequence. The law of the wolves table manners do not matter. The slave is estranged from it. His master slavery is a murder. Suicide slavery does not like the slave does not mental work that and my computer is whatever. Do you have the
Yeah, I have it. But where were you?
mental that actually
You got it.
I think I might be able
Just
to
keep going.
I don't know where it was. Mental work that keeps the structure from falling apart. Judicial starving creates the promised land there. Slaves are free to rattle their chains because the promised land is civil rights and the motionless of death because we destroy revolution and hate the earth. They have to flow fruit of abolition. Revolutionary never make peace with an education. Memory for forgetting beings because they are James Christian. Haiti being belonging is useful in understanding the beginning of white over black in the United States. Education is principal instrument to awaken the child to cultural values, preparing himself for training. You have a imperative back imperative to refuse the attribution of moral qualities. The master's institutions yet to be demonstrated. There's no negotiating the waste occurring 13. The fiat of it historical chain engages before awareness what is actual appeal to such mentality qualities. Moral progress is races activists try to remove the potentiality of a world where the race just is transformed into white race and anti-racist, but this includes white supremacy, anti-ethical, spirit, compared to argue government act justly is based on race institutions, truth that racial institutions, moral qualities have to be demonstrated abstract from realities, frames towards the personal history, appeals to a land who bar on positive future will act from the slave office is not repressive, ethical propagation comes from the possibility of acting to values of freedom and life, since none of these can be achieved for the black in a world framed by their oppressive force, either as superstition, because the political basis of humanity is the origin of oppressive conceptualizations until a rupture with the human is brought forth because of global economic and immigration policies, the environment distribution of world resources will bring this statistical anti-ethnic expression of white virtue to so a conscious towards liberation. There is no negotiation, anti-blackness, militancy solves Jackson 72. The government exists because of the order to ensure a cycle exists between elements of society. Our aim is to stop the life cycle of our creating perfective disorder. Disorder will be hassled by tanks of truth, the cities of Rochester where a commercial voice should be moving because undercut the ability to move to another tank. This shall just not help the cause of when a personal fires into a crowd of the elusive guerrillas. Cities built with very little planning, hiding guerrilla just effectively as any force failed to gain full support to the confrontation. All elements exist of the going rule of invincible against the industrial-based armies because working against the establishment of a similar mentality that making the most of the right time wins a war because the tank can be destroyed with $2 of materials. The jet is useless against Ralphaman or more toward the pilot can be killed with a knife. The establishment forces cannot survive prolonged unrest. Administering returns is eventually reached. There's no possibility of government overcoming a determined internal debate. Ammo Deliato reminds us that a nigga with immigration documents is still a nigga, dangerously embedded in the homeland from which they are excluded. The question of where and when niggas enter shouldn't be reduced to tepid mix of naturalization or coronation, but found in the fusions assemble of dispossession flash refuse the infinite dural of race through lawful admission mode in 18 refugees study change because study change the world. What they happen to such a study is an habitation that moves away from population and with her she is her visible she is a commodity of impassive domestic changer and but independent form of which she is excluded. The question where and when she enters when the interest is reduced to some type of mixture of naturalization coordination is failed solution that is balloon abstract replication shaded by the option to refuse what has been refused because what is common tossable it is a own turtle for all what is common toss not just national but also racial lawful and unlawful racial operated stateless so stateless not only being as the field marker between the different citizens and non-citizens of state is an active racial sexual marker which is regulation at stake. There's necessary distinction between delusional system as of individual national development, the purposation of acting to mechanics of flight of few disassembled dispossession of flesh. The role of the judge is to abolish white debate communities. Hardening 17 across racial affinity can only be found in the moments of revolutionary violence. I'm not a past time for events which you or a struggle for which you will offer solidarity. White communities is a contradiction. The only thing you can do is abolish a working community is community anti-community. People who represent themselves as white are not allies because they have no place from which to sow this unless they embrace blackness. White people have a big role to play in revolutionary violence because abolition of white communities is monumental. Blackness is always future those coming into blackness like community difference footsteps of reality. This is going to be a practice of feeling in depth conventional narratives of desegregation through moral and rational appeal or a historical and whitewash of history of black self-defense and white accomplices. Guns made the civil rights movement possible occurring in 15. Contrary to the mention that we are only dealing with racist means from remains of white interests which responds to the moral and rational appeal. Some theorists have endorsed self-defense against white terrorism. Many idealize the non-violence of Dr. Luther King because this overlooks the independence non-violence placement of military revolts. Gun made the civil rights movement possible because of weapons led by artists now by struggle to protect themselves so as to survival because of other southern black people created the triple organization from the ground up became advocates for Hogan's contrast to boundaries organizations like the anti-state for expectation. These were pro-left through their racial violence product of military tendencies or tendency to use black organization forms that ought to respect black identities. This ignores the function that these had social spaces where black theories were debated and tested. The second tendency with limited use or exploration of limbs as theorists because it's due to the anxiety caused by militant black resistance, black feminist workers equating military resistance with patriarchy has supported a historical determination. Military state militant research produces the best foundation. Great Britain 7 we question not from the perspective of the years moving forward organization, but as a part of overlapping circuit struggle, militant investigation is not afraid to admit how to move forward in the uncertain never resolved because the argument turned around to question strategy was the best model to adaptees of Chavez revolution where radicals who are with the regime's right to refuse formal politics. Which one?
Read this one. That one.
Debate is not a subcultural competition. Hurley except from the ways we're out there. The TOC should not be graveyard arguments, but an antagonist occupation of the university space for liberation. UC 93 remain barricaded with the prescribed categories or workforce will be limited. We are at odds with another social students, activists, administration for the place, time, and giving meaning. Reform subculture each group, the liberal pile, so as opposed to the classroom is the management of our consent to social death, social death, acceptance, institutions meaning for all the academic meaning. It's the positions we are thoughtlessly enact social rupture as a function of the war because our social rupture is the function of the war. You contains the ability to create a new frame for an end to social death. We need unmanaged wild bodies. We are not antagonistic to take over ruins. We will find another. The only card we didn't read was the Traber card.
So first, what did the 1AC do that was good?
Identify that there was a race war.
I guess, why is making a descriptive statement
it's more
about
than
the
just a
world?
descriptive statement. It's an affirmation of militancy against the race.
We also don't
Okay,
think...
so
we
what
also,
does the 1AC do
also,
to forward militancy?
Well, it says militancy would be a good idea.
The Jackson card says why militancy is good and how
Okay,
it's
but what do you do to foster skills that would be good for militancy? Do you identify a specific strategy that would be
we
good?
make debates about the race war instead of about legal immigration.
Okay,
We'll make arguments later
Let's
in this
say-
debate. Hold on, we'll make arguments that later prove that most of the community thinks that there is not a race war going on. If we win that there is a race war going on, there's no incentive to talk about the topic. Instead, we should be discussing the race war, how to solve it.
Why is talking about the race war incompatible with talking about the topic?
Well, it's not about talking about it, it's about the skills that are produced, right? So
So what skills does the 1AC produce?
militant skills. Like all the cards I read are talking about the importance of militant
Yes, you talk about the
research.
importance of militant skills. Why do you produce militant skills?
What do you mean, why do you produce militant skills?
It's like, well,
i.e. saying
debates,
skills are good is not the
because-
same as producing
Like,
because-
so debates that have so the card that we read, I forgot the author name, is the one that's like which debates are best. The Art After Harney, no, that one. The Graber card literally talks about students should debate about what forms of militancy are best. It gives the example of like the Zapatistas versus Chavez's revolution. That's sort of the question of what are the militant.
I'm going to move on.
Participating.
What is a race war?
a war between two races.
Okay, and I guess how would we distinguish a time period in which there was not a race war with one where there was?
That's like an irrelevant question.
Also, like just like whether or not, like if we win a claim for why there was a race war, and we're like these things caused it, these things didn't happen. There's two different time periods.
What caused the race war?
Well, it's not. I shouldn't say it caused. It's like what constitutes a race war.
Okay,
we think Trump getting elected constitutes a race war.
Okay, so the race war began with the election of Trump.
We think that's something that constitutes. Like for example, if that was solely a thing, that would constitute a race war.
Okay,
but it
so
also did not.
Your entire app is about identifying the fact that there is a race war is good, and yet you can provide no details about the race war.
Who cares what caused it? That's the current situation.
I just said if Trump is president, that is a race war. It's like you were like, okay.
But then you said the race war began before Trump.
Yes.
So what started the race war?
We have not made an argument about what started the race war. We're not making sort of a structural argument about ways that anti-blackness operates and things like that. We're just saying the status quo is a race war.
Okay, and I guess so. Trump is president. That means there's a race war.
If Trump were no longer
president, I just gave an example. It's like that is something that would constitute.
If we were able to remove Trump from office, would that be a good thing?
Well, yeah, no shit.
Yes or no?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, like yes, but it begs the question of whether or not we can.
Also, that doesn't end the race war. There's a bunch of examples.
Also, I don't think Highland Park can do that, but.
Alright, that's fine.
Okay.
I guess I'll flash it.
Yeah, once. What?
Did Drew leave? Wow, that's bad. You can say goodbye. That's right.
Sorry, it's taking a while to pop
Yeah,
up in the computer.
That's a solid voice, too.
Is it you still here?
I think so.
Very. Convinced me to God, I have those not true.
What do you do? It's going wrong.
All I do is try to feet and like actually insert things about them from their shoes, and I'm like,
Well, it's on your computer, right?
No, it's
There it is. It showed up though.
Alright.
oh, like it's a shoe wear.
Are you on the internet? Are you on the internet?
Through my phone.
Oh, but not on like the thing. How did you get on? Yeah. How did you get on it?
I'm on it.
I did. I don't know. I think it kicks you off after periods of inactivity. And I've been doing a different. I have a real job that I have to constantly be figure out. So I've just been the most active on the internet.
I've tried, like, I've got the password, I've entered it, it just didn't work, so.
No.
I think it has a number of permissions, and the way that it includes people is an inactivity period. So sustained engagement with the internet, which you can't do because you're literally getting speeches, will kick you off.
See, I was on it, then I got kicked off.
Yeah.
Then I literally tried to get on it for another 30 minutes, and they were like, no.
Permissions are occupied, and they haven't kicked anybody off. Is my weakness for what's going on. Knowing the very limited idea about IT.
Do you want it?
Oh. Okay, cool. We're good.
Alright. So there's gonna be 2 off, and then case. Is anyone not ready?
I'm not even close to
Do you need flow?
What?
Do you need flow?
No. I flow on my computer, but my computer is again broken right now. I'm gonna. You can go. Hopefully it restarts by the time cross-X starts, but you go.
Okay, sweet. Is anyone not ready?
The interpretation of the USFG should mean that they should only be about governmental policy actions. Section 03, the H topic contains an agent of the United States state should adopt a policy. The agent is a subject should mean to put a policy into action through governmental action. That means the debate is about whether something ought to occur and resolved as legislative at Army Officer School 04. The colon introduces a formal resolution resolved the council petition the mayor. And reduce means to make a smaller amount. Columns 18. Reduce make smaller amount. And restriction on legal limitation include qualitative and quantitative limitations on the 5 paths to LPR. Task 16. Restriction on legal limitation. First quantitative. Limit the number and category of eligibility. Second, qualitative people. Congress has determined should not be allowed to path to LPR broken down into family, employment, refugees, society's diversity. Violations are not topical. The impact is iterative testing. T creates a predictable limits, which makes the topic manageable for the negative. Clash is an intrinsic good and also turns the case because the app should be considered presumptively false. And topicality is procedural, which comes before substance. It's a question of whether or not debate should have happened. And at worst, I agree with the app and vote neg because the app is not topical and we should not be required to debate it. The ballot isn't key to the offense.
Second off.
Capitalism makes extinction inevitable. Unsustainable resource exploitation and wealth distribution makes collapse and imminent. Only redistribution solves. 14. Global industrial civilization includes collapse in coming decades due to unsustainable resource exploitation and increasingly unequal wealth distribution and advanced complex civilizations are susceptible to collapse or raising questions about the sustainability of modern civilization, the stretching of resources, and the economic stratification of society into rich and poor. High levels of economic stratification are linked directly to overconsumption. Accumulated surplus is not evenly distributed through society, but rather should be have been controlled by the elite. Technological changes and to raise both per capita resource consumption and the scale of every resource extraction. Elites eventually consume too much, resulting in famine. Elite wealth monopolies mean that they are buffered from the most detrimental effects of the environmental collapse until much later historical collapses were allowed to occur. The worst case scenarios are by no means inevitable. Structural changes could avoid the collapse if the resources are distributed in a reasonably equitable fashion. And their approach makes universalized struggles against capital impossible. The reduction of the political arena to a series of language games radically localizes politics and removes the importance of material consequences. Capitalism needs these types of tactics to continue running its course. After 95. What remains of the left politics in the West is increasingly opposed to politics based on the assumption that the history of the U.S. has entered a new phase. Ideology is assumed to be displaced by the ceaseless permutations of discourse games and practice of social transformation is put into question by the language game to displace the existing meanings of social signs and then to bring about a new century and order. The core is the displacement of materiality by the discursive post-style politics to confess the scope of politics to the arena of superstructure and reducing it to simply cultural politics concerned with radical interventions. In contrast, in transformative politics involves radical interventions in relation to production and its superstructural forms. It seeks to end the exploitation and divisions of labor. Not only is the social decentered, but social relations, like all signifying systems, are ultimately arbitrary. Politics can no longer be grounded on clear identities and positions, nor can it be situated in a reality outside of representation as a referent for any action. Any transformative or materials of politics are seen as foundations. Politics is thus not a matter of devising strategies. Such a politics of intervention no longer seeks to transform reality and rejects the possibility of social revisionism or revolution. The erasure of the issue of ideology greatly mystifies these social struggles over truth and the justice by confining them into the arena of language games and cutting off their connection to production. And one of the most serious problems with eluding knowledge is the way they plays and rule and generating many logical mystification necessary to lay capitalism, which is the erasure of class struggle, and reject the one I see in favor of a historical materialist approach. Only this creates this type of class consciousness that can create a revolution. 201. The new effective political theory will have to offer an integrated understanding of the social practice and offer a outline for the practice of only orthodox Marxism has been able to produce integrated knowledge of existing social totality and provide lines of practice to act. One has to first of all know the existence of the social totality and that the social totality is based on the inequality of economic access, systematic inequality are all determined by the fundamental contradiction of capitalism. Humanization, not eradication of capitalism is the sole goal of all contemporary laws. Such an understanding of social inequality is based on the fundamental understanding that the source of wealth is knowledge and not labor. This is wealth free from the objective conditions that shape the historical relations of capital. Only Marxism recognizes its historicity of labor and its primacy. Any emancipatory theory has to be founded on a condition to the priority of the Marx labor theory of value. Case. Only direct macro political approaches create change. The alternative fails because it doesn't alter the interest. Sac 17. A direct approach to injustice may be needed to address unfair policy and conditions for minorities and racist societies. What people care about is not ideal justice, but how maybe injustice in creating a concrete event can be corrected in here and now. Models of justice assume words by themselves have power to transform reality, or as they would agreement with the words will automatically result in action if intoxically and effectively utopian. Applicative justice takes a comparative and pragmatic approach. A government is an ongoing contention among interest groups. Rights secured by justice are constantly subject by political bargaining, and the calculus of social interest, outrage, critiques of white supremacy, or analysis of white privilege cannot be changed anything by themselves by contradicting the rules. Might have a causal power. Reality cannot be changed by normative pronouncements, but only by shifts in the interests of groups of real people. To base hopes for change on normative content alone may eliminate means for taking action that could result in change. Political philosophers to construct maps of politics or party and power may challenge justice. Those who aim for justice may struggle against such obstacles through specific changes in concrete practices as well as changes in law. And immigration optimism good. Combining approaches is better than the all alone. Ignoring the state ensures the mechanism is co-opted, but engaging in it demands for immigration reform can be transformative. King 16. It's unrealistic to talk about wholly autonomous social structures. The second they are consequential, they'll notice it becomes impossible to break antagonism by will alone. We may antagonize the state, but also respond to this has also happened time and time again, from equating the bending of laws around private property, infiltration by the DCA of the Black Panther movement. The history of struggles for liberation has included demands of the state, engagement of politics, of right, struggle against police violence through visible collective action against the border, demand of state recognition. Citizenship has been seen as the reinforcing the role of the state as a grantor, but when it comes to actual practices of resolute standing against such strategies seem naive and insulting. Modern struggles often claim rights. Sometimes the only available strategy in situations of extreme vulnerability where options are limited. Recognizing our relations of power means recognizing our situation is imperfect. Sometimes we must engage with the state. Beyond claims that reinforce the state representation only brings people into power. Means rejecting a past movement. When oppressed have always the refusal from the Black Panthers to the same papers. Demands for the representation, challenge of power, and create new emancipated subjectives. And the exclusion of immigrants creates a gradation of humanity that reproduces conditions of the social and literal death for non-citizens, dreaming of a radically inclusive futurity in which the law doesn't define others as security threats as decolonial practice. Has started 18. Dreaming becomes radical and freedom-oriented when it moves up into the question of received narratives. This often openings into other more socially just worlds. The term alien connotes a thing that does not belong, clearly not human. Literature of immigration policy served by transforming the alien and producing a new legal political subject. Legal immigrant is a negated personhood defined by absence. Without conflating histories of oppression, and legal immigrants have been subjected to social death and literal death, allying forms of value to personhood with blackness. So will he the racializing assemblages gradations between the non-human, not quite human, and the human. Power as an assemblage of white supremacy, settler colonialism, capitalism, and heteropatriarchy. Police the borders of simple dreaming, while the contours are inevitably shaped by power. They are also not reducible to it. In that instances for another something, another humanity is a decolonial future we desire, but have yet to fully formulate that desire for otherwise is the stuff of revolution, radical social movements, socialist, black nationalist, third world liberation, or struggles to dream in more inclusive and colonial ways. When we cease to dream, we have truly been colonized. We sense a hopeful possibility embedded in social justice, dreaming and a collective political action born out of struggles with other dreamers. Lost. What if our visions of the future were exception the insurgent imagination to the marginal? This can open up dreaming outside dominated policies and boundaries. These have the power to revive or repress the indigenous knowledge that could hail modern age wander in the realm of our imagination. We rehearse and perform other bodies as we conjure up other worlds. We do more than act over scenarios. We envision what could have happened. Oftentimes we do not ask how dreams can and should be instrumentalized toward another set of political goals, more liberatory ones. And state level analysis is uniquely key for figuring out how race becomes embedded in immigration law. Johnson UK. The challenge for scholarship will be to expand and include effects immigration law have on minorities, citizens. Every time immigration scholarship fails to engage race theories, distrustful of the law, have not spent time trying to unravel immigration doctrine. It is important to avoid simple deconstruction. Scholars need a meaningful exchange of ideas. Every scholars take insights into the traditional value venues and inject the question of race. Avoid having scholarship marginalized. The discussion must be two-way. Race scholars must consider doctrine as a source of insight and interracial dynamic of immigration law. And adding a race critique of immigration law increases the chances that it will be placed on the agenda.
You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Why should we trust army definitions during the race war?
Our argument, I guess, I don't think you need to trust the definition.
Why should we think they're predictable, precise, what we should be debating about?
Well, because the claim that the evidence is making is factual. The term resolve
why should we trust the army to say what they are saying is factual?
Well, I guess you don't have to trust the unique qualifications of the
Why
card.
should we trust their definition?
Here's a factual claim. Robert's rules introduced this procedure, resolved : That procedure has been used to mediate legislative forms for a long period of time.
Okay.
The Army Officers School is observing that
You
trend.
said our AF is a language game. Can you elaborate?
Our argument is that because it was like situated within debate, like a linguistic and discursive space, and it wasn't tied to a specific material outcome, then it is a language game.
Why isn't militancy a specific material outcome? That seems
because militancy is like a form of praxis. You have to advocate the use of militancy to do a specific thing that is good.
So the argument that you just explained it as a link was that you used like a space of debate to explain it. Why doesn't that equally link to the alternative?
No. The argument is that you said militancy good. You situated that in a discursive space, and you said being militant in debate is good. We say that you should have oriented that militancy towards a specific pragmatic outcome. That's one way.
Why did the alt do that? You said historical materialist approach. Like,
and then we've advocated for a specific set of outcomes, the creation of a socialist state. We'll defend a specific outcome.
What is the threshold for clash?
There is no threshold that's linear. There are certain situations in which there is more clash. There are certain situations in when there is less clash.
But okay, so what constitutes clash? That still means like you need to determine what is less clash.
Yeah. What is the question? I'm sorry.
Like,
how
do you know when someone's clashed?
So two prepared opponents talking to one another about the same thing, having researched, having engaged with one another.
And why does that require the resolution?
Because we think it's a predictable stasis point that creates limits and makes it towards people can sort of target their research.
Okay. How should judges evaluate competition if there is a race war?
Competition in the context of the critique?
No, like fairness.
I understand.
Okay.
The argument is that you said militancy and generating those types of skills is good. The judge should endorse a model of debate where we can best foster those types of skills, as well as the fact that we've made sort of procedural arguments.
Wait. See, that was my original question, not about the skills. So how did the judges determine whether or not procedural arguments come before skill building if the race war is true? Like, my question is, why does the game matter?
The question itself is a non sequitur in my view.
Why does the game matter if the race war is
unrealistic?
Like the first part of your question was like,
all of our reasons why
you basically were like, the role of the ballot is to be like,
race war means those things.
Wait, you basically said like the role of the ballot is to create skills from the race war, but then you're like procedure, but whatever, that's fine.
Alright, I'm gonna flash it to y'all, right?
Yeah. You just keep it. Could you pass it this way?
Sorry. No problem.
I think we can make that too. I can't.
There's a very cold debate.
It's 59 degrees.
I can put that on. You could switch out.
This is little everyone shuffle. They get to cool off. They get to warm up.
Are we good for an order? Yeah. Case with an overview before the line by line, the cap K T. Yeah, no good. Anyone not ready? God gave Noah the rainbow sign. We're in a race war and black people are fighting for their lives. Empirics are on our side. The status quo is normalized. Ironic, alright. Control of the White House and media sciences over the systemic burning of black churches in Louisiana. Black people drinking water in Flint and extrajudicial killings of Ferguson protesters. Rodriguez says the plenum from post-civil rights. Liberalism has swung right and way. White populism has taken hold to establish a global civil war. The race war has seeped into debate. Judges threatening to call cops on black debaters who play rowdy music. Coaches naming the presidency to create non-black juries against black debate. Distance high school programs calling Georgia black identity extremists who cheats to victory. The role of the judges to abolish the white community. The ballot obviously can't end the race war, but we should not reward unethical protocols of internal debate. There is a paradigmatic imperative for a militancy. There's too much at stake to deny the urgency of the race war, which threatens the physical and psychic violence for black seniors militants. Curry says that if the whites win the race war, it threatens low intention alienation in everyday spaces here in high intensity wars and environmental destruction that disproportionately affects the rest of the earth. No more water fire. Next time, the line blind, the first piece of Zach evidence, they cede militancy to the right white supremacists, have a monopoly on violence, and kill peaceful Ferguson protesters and scare people from voting in polls and campaigning that were prior, because the history of the Mississippi freedom movement proves that only reviving a tradition of arming the left can protect nonviolent reform campaigns from assault. That's the Curry evidence there. Immigration optimism, good Armone evidence answers this and says that immigration operates as a foil to prop up white nationalism under the guise of inclusion. Instead of this, we should move away from legality to teach the skills pertinent to black students during the race war. There's sort of king evidence that they read a couple of answers. First, this whitewashes history there, like white liberals who are due distance MLK from his revolutionary roots to benign problem of democracy. The aft doesn't preclude infiltrating organs of government, but says militancy must come first, so white supremacists don't outgun you when you show up to the door. That's a Curry evidence. Fiat isn't infiltration of organs of the government. Two warrants. One is it abuse the USFT with ethical qualities. It doesn't exist. Fiat transposes radical intentions onto an organization run by the alt-right who has Naziist tendencies. That's a Curry evidence. You must call a space for this. It also obscures the the necessity of organizing the blueprint of step 1 USFG should, step 2 question mark, step 3 infiltration teaches bad skills. The next argument about exclusion of immigrants, no link to this, never said that immigration was impossible, but rather instead there's a more urgent questioning of radical planning to avoid the race war. There's sort of state level of analysis argument. I did that above, but this part is anti-black, assumes that it uses the language of ivory tower theorizing without engaging racism, which assumes that the race war is out there rather than in here, which would be a framing argument for all the topicality stuff. The Cap K permutation to both black militancy materially tears down white capitalist civilization, proven by relations between Wanda Marshall from the Black Revolutionary Action Movement and Mao to globalize armed revolution, Kelly and Issue 99 black internationals are part of the Communist Manifesto identify which China against the capitalist West Arm was working to take its armification remedy under class and becomes all people, color, and Asian. Elsewhere, the black underclass was is in the model called colonial war. The black underclass says no only alternative for yourself of capitalism. This is to destroy Western bourgeoisie civilization or world black revolution to coordinate this ram call for the group liberation on the world. Scare residual links to cultural militancy or excessive sensitivities to black extremism that pathologizes them. Walcott and 18 black freedoms in opposition to capitalism, given that the black white was entering the capital without both commodity and labor. Black freedom inaugurates modes of living in accord with global calls for world beyond reconciliation gestures. The problem is one of culture rather than economics. Culture provides the grounds of all human reality of transformation. Marx had not imagined the commodity that treats black intellectuals but is central for collective possibility, sensitivity, black chauvinism by revolutionaries create hostile spaces, suspicion among black people, politics of thought, a place somebody set the place that produces death, forcibly environmental disaster, which began the movement, colonization, slavery, and new liberal order challenges that artificially modes of left work institutions regard for black life, new materials, so necessary begin with the language of all. Codes were suggested that black people are brutally placed on the lowest rung of the language and doesn't require a constant revision can't solve the case. First, it intensifies a race war in Marxist collectives. The purity politics of white Stalinism that universalized the needs of poor whites led to the erasure of black women like Claudia Jones, seen as distancing. Second, it can't explain the race war and debate. The fact that policy versus critique debates are called clash of civilization debates stems from a history of cultural conflict, and capitalism can't explain racist ticks and framework to seize their extinction scenario. The race war is here now. It causes extinction for black populations, means we're ahead on time frame. Also, it outweighs the spell in the flesh and soul here for black students. Now, the link arguments are ridiculous. We don't get reduced to a political arena of language games because militancy is material. This also links just as much to them because their explanation of historical materialism is also discursive in a space like debate. T. Debate is a competition, is a microcosm of the race war. Refuse the compositional moves of the truancy overview that substantive procedures as a neutral mechanism to preserve a role for the neck. Highland Park is guilty of desiring the minimum amount of change to the game while presenting themselves as having the best intentions to keep antagonisms at bay. Wilder Senate, the claim of fair play for goes on a comprehensive argument that white people are guilty until proven innocent. Fuck the composition of a nation. Anyone who knows 20 black folks intimately and knows the statement to be true, whites are guilty of produces concepts like fairness. How can you maintain the minimum amount of change while preserving ourselves as having the best intentions of passive revolutionaries over which reformers better keep antagonisms at bay? Every black everybody knows that you don't love the things that you thought your fantasy speak. White people are guilty of structured abuse around to produce. They were of like one incorporate color folks at their own pace, provide a reason why teamers play. Okay, that they're I think that teams of pretty is and civil enemy profiling non-blacks dictating the rules of engagement for the race war in this community is complicit in the clash of civs mentality that intensifies profiling and ostracization of black identity. Extremists that threaten the predictable terms of refined debate. Rodriguez says that the low intensity surveillance of black radicalism fortifies alienation here, and the clash of civs mentality is exported to make us advocates for ascendancy within white parameters. Counterinterpretation. The one issue should endorse militancy against the protocols of the internal debate of legal immigration. The race war is a matter of life and death for students. Their skills disarm the oppressed manos and for the debate in high school system to take place in nowhere where even the thought of issues a historical matter of life and death in the debate. It doesn't teach the matter which position to assume the opposition are equal to facing the balance of the power. My scholarship is not disinterested in militant those in debate should Christian traditional political and instrumental language to favor the debate in which the life of that matter single concept saturate government learned that argument skills in debate and having a master disarming the oppressed and critical consciousness and quad for avoiding the disaster. This Is occupation not managed? Consent for deliberation flag. Students are expected to assume a submissive pose in the classroom and check the race war at the door so those on the wrong side can have their turn. This logic that protesters are in the wrong place at the wrong time is the bias for excluding low-intensity violence that expands the graveyard into the academy. That's the OUCB evidence. Flipping neg to go for framework proves they're on the wrong side of the race war. They know that we read apps about black grievances and they chose to uphold the clash of cis, which in this internal debate is white supremacy. Reading the Army officer school definitions as an independent voting issue proves that their arguments about not being the arguments about dogmatism, you should read those with skepticism. They explicitly use military institutions to define out radicals, which is how they instantiate the race war. Their iterative testing arguments. Wolves' table manner. Debate is a site of ideological warfare that regulates who can participate in scholarly dialogue and deems the black radical tradition is lacking intellectual refinement, a vision of clash that adds black participants and stirs the superficial multiculturalism that denies how the pretense of engaging in dialogue and providing a role for non-black opponents is hijacked by white supremacist Hawthorne. In 1918, voices of some of these food from dialogue. The academy can say advance to regulate those who participate in the project more than add black people and start as moving on superficial inclusion to think of what a tradition to deem sufficiently scholars. The black scholarly practice of versus models of intellectual lineages in favor of non-hierarchy. All studies take liberatory knowledge to the point of departure from dialogue and debates. Generations of black scholars carve out spaces when they're not for often to see at the table. When we enter debate, we are studying the course of years of liberation. Manifesto charms and targets. They are plurally they're tied to white supremacy. When we stand by white supremacists come from under the premise of engaging dialogue, we force it embody threat to the wars of military suppressions opposed. Militancy is a better model. The race war is most predictable for those who live it. In debates over George Jackson's guerrilla tactics versus the Zapatistas' opacity versus the Bolivian Revolution are prolific. That's the grabber evidence. The role of the teachers to put the internal debate of immigration on timeout to debate the best model of revolution. You should presume our arguments are false. This is a logic that presumes black people are wrong from the onset of communication. Re-entrenches sort of the arguments that black people are seen as crazy or too performative for the debate. T can't come before the case. The one I see was an impact turn to saying that their model is better for creating skills for black students during a race war. Agreeing with the app and voting negative is bad. It doesn't solve because we have impact turns to their model of debate. That ballot it does solve our offense. First of all, it's about models debate. If we win that our model is better during the race war, that's obviously a recent vote app. It also corrects pathologies within debate because it's the only currency. If they try to make an argument that breaking new means something about competition, it doesn't elevate competition as the primary incentive. Black stasis does deny the importance of strategic considerations, but Highland Park should be open to black innovation and increase substantive equity. I could read this card. Let me do that one. I have 20 seconds. I'll just do it. No? Okay, go back to the cat, okay? Yeah, it's fine. We have 50 seconds. The link argument that they articulate is just like, you're discursive. This is really bad for them because it means that either their link argument is just like, you focus on race, which is bad, and they've conceded that the race war is happening now and is going to kill black people, which means the alternative can't solve for that because it's only focused on class and materialism.
Start question 4, cross it, 10 minutes.
No, I don't have the flash. That's just the cat.
Now, 8:30.
Did you write that down? You got that one?
Actually, one more. Hey, 8:10 now.
How much you have?
8:10.
8:10.
Okay. So she
Good? Yeah.
Alright. First, theoretical reasons for executing other than the militancy stuff.
The what?
I don't think it's theoretical.
It's not theoretical. It's just performative link arguments that sort of prove how you're on the wrong side of the race war and that your mom.
So any other reasons to reject your team?
I mean, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
It's like it's not condo. It's not theory arguments. Like we have reasons why if you drop an argument you lose.
I'm sorry. The what?
The Archer evidence.
The what evidence?
The Archer evidence.
Oh, I didn't read that card.
Yeah, okay, you didn't read the Archer evidence. Sweet.
But I can explain the argument if you make a movement, Lori.
What's the second no all solvency argument?
I'm fairly sure we either didn't get a card or you read the Archer evidence because it was something tagged with disorientation, and then I heard the words Archer.
Do you want to know on T the cards I read?
Disorientation.
Wilderson, Spanos, Hawthorne, and Heights, and that's it. Just those 3 cards.
Okay, so
Yep.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I give a 10-minute 1 hour?
No.
Why? Why not?
Because there's a difference between rules and procedures. T is a procedure. It's contestable in terms of how we get it. Speech times are rules.
Also, if you're on the wrong side of the race war, why should you get more time to speak?
That's really good.
What's the second no all solvency card?
The Walcott evidence is talking about how your sort of residual links to sort of cultural sensitization. So the only possible way that you can explain a link to the cap argument after crossing to the 1 and C is you focus on race, which is bad. That pathologizes sort of black Marxist understandings of movements against capitalism by saying that they're too focused on racialized sorts of violence. What splinters resistance means that you can't mobilize the most important part of the working class, which is black folk.
Sweet. Okay, so we agree with everything you just said. What do you want us to say?
Okay, you agree? Like.
Okay. So people already know racism is bad. So once you read your app, everyone you interacted with now knows.
Okay.
What is your performance in this round due to resolve the issues of the 1 and C?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. While people might think that racism is bad, the way that they perceive racism is incredibly different. The way that they perceive racism is different. Obviously, a race war is different than just racism.
Okay, so moving on. The Army officer. Can you explain that argument there?
Okay, this is the thing that George said in cross section. It's you've read a definition from a military officer, which is obviously on the wrong side of the race war. We're so supposed to have militants uprising against the state. The argument is just your definitions are predictable only to you, only to people on the wrong side of the race war, and just prove that it's not applicable to black students who are fighting for their lives right now.
That's fine. 8:30.
I thought it was 8:10.
Oh, it is 8:10. I forgot that we took the second.
Martin said if you guys spar, pick the lock.
I'll fight someone. I go to a boxing trainer. I'm ready to fight someone.
What is it?
was the argument right after, like, presuming the 1AC to be false is bad? Like the one right after that?
Give me a second, let me find it. It was... T can't come before case because we were in contact from the debate.
I'm sorry, one more
T can't come before case, we were in contact from the
Got it. Okay, 333. There are no note cards. Can I have this stand?
Thank you, guys. They're smart. They are. They love to, if one of them messes up, they just decide to collectively fail. So they're just like, drop something on the 2
Actually,
That
333.
one's it for us. We have to have a good chance through, like, if one of you messes up, the other step in, instead of being like, oh, yeah, with your girlfriend. Like, what is that? I love it.
Okay, now 322.
You said 322?
Yeah.
What you doing?
T.
Is there an overview?
Fairly substantial. Okay.
I'm gonna give me a second. I'm gonna put down a summary sheet. You good?
Cool. Our interpretation is that the affirmative team should endorse the instrumental evaluation of the United States federal government restricting the United States federal government substantially reducing its restrictions on legal immigration to the United States. Vote negative for a smaller topic with a stable point of stasis. Limited topics create iterative testing. This process of research and argumentation involves the constant refinement of arguments over the course of a season. A more limited topic produces better debates over core locus points of contestation that results in several successive debates over the same core controversy, which develops intricacy and nuance within arguments. Debates' pedagogical uniqueness is that it is one of the rare places in which we artificially limit the discussion to produce in-depth discussions between two well-prepared opponents. There are a couple impacts. First is clash. There's obviously some intrinsic value to this activity. There has to be some reason why we spend hours researching, traveling to tournaments, and debating. Clash produces better debates through in-depth research and analysis within the round. Rounds are pedagogically worse when they devolve into two ships passing in the night. In-depth debates foster academic skepticism over hegemonic claims. Absent clash, dogmatism and polarization infiltrate into discussions, which undermines the ability to persuade people who hold dissenting opinions. There's a fairness impact. Their model of debate results in a monopolization of ground that imbalances the resolution which was decided and negotiated in advance. Debate fairness is an impact in and of itself because debate is inherently a game and the ability to win each specific debate matters. Second, research. Regardless of your orientation towards society, the process of researching and defending a well-developed position produces the needed advocacy skills to advocate for positions outside of the debate round. Whether it be combating injustices or just improving daily aspects of our lives, the ability to defend your position is valuable in and of itself. Debate's ultimate goal is not to determine the objective truth of arguments, but rather to refine the abilities of the debaters. Turns militancy. Saying skills are good and saying that we should be militant is not the same as actually inculcating those skills. We provided reasons why stasis is the best way to accomplish that. There are a couple framing issues for why our impact should outweigh. First, process precludes content. The process of the game begs the question about whether or not the content of debate is desirable in the first place, so they have to prove that the process of debating their F is desirable before they prove the impact of the 1AC. Second, only the ballot can solve procedural issues, which means that voting affirmative does not resolve their impacts. Third, it's a broader scope. Things like advocacy skills have the same ability to resolve impacts in and outside of debate, which means it can resolve a large magnitude of violence. The TVA subsumes large quantities of their offense. There are two. The first is a refugee sabotage act modeled off of UGA's affirmative from this year on the presidential authority topic, which is that you bring in large numbers of refugees with an orientation towards starting and abetting the race war and removing Trump from office. You can use all the core topic literature, and the negative can negate the desirability of the aforementioned action. The second is just using black militancy and orienting that towards open borders and deconstructing Trump's existing and racist immigration regime. The important framing issues of the topical version of the affirmative doesn't need to solve the 1AC, but rather allow them to discuss the scholarship that they've presented. Any dissent or solvency take-up they win to the TVA proves that there's negative ground, which is an advantage to our model of debate. You should prefer debatability over ideological perfection. They say that we desire the minimum amount of change. That's not true. We think that all of the things they listed, the bad practices in this community and the forms of violence that are being committed against people are bad, and we think those things should be changed. We say that there is one norm that should stay the same, which is not desiring the minimum amount of change, but rather saying that we should have stasis such that we can remediate all of the other issues with debate that they have problematized. They say that non-black people dictating the terms of debate is bad, but this fundamentally misunderstands what framework posits. Framework isn't dictating the terms. Rather, we're engaging in this deliberative form, discussing what the best model of debate is, incorporating perspectives from multiple individuals, and then asking the judge to tell us at the end of the round which model they think is best for inculcating the types of skills that they think are good. It's not an imposition, and it certainly doesn't result in ostracization. They haven't articulated an internal link to that argument. They then say that surveillance is bad, but one, there's no reason why that's intrinsic to reading a topical plan. Two, they've introduced the affirmative and their expressed desire for militant politics into this form and into this space, which makes surveillance inevitable because debate gets viewed by large numbers of spectators, as proven by this round. They say counterinterpretation militancy. One, it doesn't solve any of our offense because one, it's unpredictable. Anyone could choose any sort of praxis and say that is the limit on the topic. But unless you attach it to some sort of resolutional stasis, there's no basis for it, which means you justify an infinite number of prospective affirmatives. Second, militancy is not exclusive with our vision of the topic as proven by the TVA, which means that there's no net benefit to their counterinterpretation because ours includes large swaths of theirs. They say our skills are bad, but that's certainly not true. The Spanish evidence doesn't speak to the sort of advocacy skills that we have impacted out. Rather, it says that discussing the government is bad, which is a question of content, not a question of militant skills. We think that the negatives model of debate best fosters militancy and best fosters mobilization by making it to where people can engage in third and fourth level argument testing, improving persuasive abilities, improving the ability to conduct research, all sorts of things, which is more important than saying true things within the round, which has no direct correlation towards skills. Plus, if they make some sort of extrapolation, we definitely get to answer that. And the 2NR, they make the next argument that our interpretation forces people to check their agendas at the door. That's obviously disproven. We're not exclusive with militant politics or in participating in the race war. Rather, the TVA proves that we just have to attach it to resolutional stasis such that participation and that discussion of the race war can be best accomplished. They say that we flip negative, and then that proves that we wanted to uphold status quo institutions. But one, the reason we flip negative is because our affirmative loses to parole, and they express their intention to go for that before the round. Second, we didn't know what type of affirmative they're going to read. They're ascribing intentions to us, which is non-falsifiable. And third, even if they win, there's some risk that we suspected that they were not going to read a topical advocacy. Our argument is that we have a good and persuasive defense of this norm, and we've proven that there's no link to any of their offense. They say our reading definitions from the Army Officer School disproves dogma offense. We're not going for dogma offense, and they haven't cohered an external impact of this outside of negating that type of offense. But regardless, we're not extending the Army Officer School evidence as a violation, and there's no reason why it should be intrinsically attached to our advocacy. The next argument is that iterative testing assumes that black people's arguments aren't refined. That's obviously not true. We've made an argument that the best way to make sure that both sides can engage with certain good sets of literature bases and with arguments like the 1AC, which we think is valuable, is through tying it to the resolution, which is proven by the TVA. The next argument is that militancy is most predictable. One, that's not true in the context of debate where there is resolutional stasis. Observing that there are large problems with the world and saying that people are aware of those problems is not the same as predicting predictability for a research-oriented activity where we have to prepare offense. The second component is that even if militancy is the most predictable, it's not offense against our interpretation because you can incorporate our interpretation encompasses militancy, but just cabins the extent to which you can the extent to which you can discuss it. The argument about assuming the 1AC to be false, being bad, that's obviously not true. We're not saying that you should assume the 1AC to be false because of any individual debater's personal racial identity. Rather, we're saying that the fact that we weren't able to research it and we weren't able to engage in focus clash is a necessary reason. They say T shouldn't come before case. I did that offense above. They say you can't say vote negative to vote F because of the model. One, we've impact from their model. Two, they obviously don't result in spillover that model. The argument about pathologization is not true. They haven't articulated why framework is pathologization. That's disproven by all the defensive work I did on the other offensive arguments. The last argument about breaking new, we're not going to that.
Breaking a couple minutes. 9:51. Hey, are we good?
Yeah.
How does your interpretation train advocates?
Sure. So when we have a focused stasis point for debate, it, one, allows us to research things and come to the most accurate conclusions about the world and the most efficacious, methods for effectuating change.
So it's just researching things.
Well, it's not just, that's why I had multiple subpoints.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So the first one is researching things makes us learn what's true. Okay.
Yeah, it helps us identify the best strategies.
Yeah.
The second is that when you engage with well-prepared opponents, i.e. both sides know going into the debate what they're going to be talking about, that you get used to sort of adversarial relations, which are sort of inherent in any militant method.
Okay.
I.e. when we, if we can confront you and we're not just completely overwhelmed, that's a better simulation of the conditions outside of this.
What is the goal of those advocates once they leave debate?
Well, we don't prescribe a particular goal. Our argument is that if we do research, we do multi-level testing, etc., and we resolve that the app is true, then obviously we would go out
here's my problem with that. So you've sort of created a disembodied form of clash where just it doesn't matter what we're talking about, it simply matters that we have a research, a limited amount of research. How do you prevent that from being exported in anti-black ways in which advocates use sort of the things that they've learned, the iterative testing, in ways that sort of fight on the wrong side of the race war?
So our argument is that clash helps us discern what is true. And we think that if you're right, that the 1AC is true, then people who engage in our model of debate, and specifically within the institutional culture of debate that has been changing, that then those people are most likely to go and do good things with those skills.
Wait, I don't understand. But your model forces teams to switch side on race war good bad. So why is that?
No, obviously not true. We can talk about the most effective ways to sort of conduct the race wars. So talk about if there are alternative practices that could be endorsed or implemented.
This begs the question.
This links way harder to your model, where you said race war good, haven't said anything else, and so we have to say race war bad or nothing else.
No, it's about competing methods of militancy. But the
TVA,
I want to talk about the TVA. The second TVA, that's like black militancy aimed at open borders. How does that meet your interpretation of USFG should do something?
Because you justify, you make a prescriptive statement for something the USFG should do, and then you advocate it through black militancy.
I just want to know so USFG should open borders, and then?
Right, and then you read a justification for sort of the method for spill up as per black militancy.
What?
But you say this thing is good, then you say we have a method for achieving it and for inculcating skills in people.
How would that operate in an open borders app?
What do you mean?
If you're just plan open borders and then you have an advantage about black militancy, I don't see the connection between those two things.
You talk about the process of obtaining open borders, and that's intrinsic to the advocacy that you've endorsed.
Yeah.
You endorse an endpoint, but we've said that's not exclusive with endorsing a method for realizing that endpoint.
But how does that endpoint, how does the method of black militancy get incorporated under that app?
The argument is that you can use militancy, you can use coercion, etc., to get the USFG to change its orientation towards immigrants.
I'm saving up for the flash drive.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm saving up for the flash drive right now.
I'll give you the top line right there.
Okay.
So, to prepare for that process, which only ever help you, and it's more likely to make the learning conservative about the test time since they feel that they're able to come to the excited to express for having it run to that. So it makes the 1A more effective as prep. It makes the 2A more likely to complete cross-sex, which in close debates can be really efficient. And it facilitates communication between both of them so that the 1A is more likely to include the line of cross-sex into the line of because they knew what the questions were going to be because they can prep it.
Is it one in our TOC2 or one?
Yeah, I got too deep in that. But I'm really into this. I think it's exciting.
What's up, Bubba?
Yeah,
Yeah, can you give me a note? Give me a note. Give me a note.
Oh, Nick has no idea what the one in
Well, it's
our.
wasted time. Then they can cancel.
Do you have any good apps? Really spicy?
We broke one like when we were on. Like where you would Lowe the one that.
Do you have an app that's us? What did that say?
I
like your arguments. I think the other thing is that all that is giving the assumption
253.
there is
How much do you have left?
253.
Now we're gonna take prep.
and
Now y'all are taking prep?
Yeah.
necessitates the so it forces it.
That's what I.
Were you able to turn that down? Cool.
Just like you appreciate most prep doesn't help you in anything.
But I think that there's a structural aspect of that necessitates the talk in ways that maybe.
Yeah, I totally agree. I get a lot of thought about this when I was a debater, but like how do you really build prep so that your utilization of it most actively occurs when they derive value? So there are moments in the debate where through it can be prepping at the same time and derive equal value. There are also moments where you can
9/11.
So for example, the 1A can prep the if they know they can be prepped and stuff like that is useful because the node does not benefit from that prep.
Okay, so the order is just going to be to calculate.
Do you all have the votes?
Yep.
I'm not
Great. Is anyone not ready?
Capitalism is a structuring element of all oppression. If we win this thesis level claim, then the impact of decay logically outweighs the out because their impact is a subsection of ours. Capitalism triggers extinction and results in massive overaccumulation, which exceeds the ecological limits and collapses the biosphere. Life is a prerequisite to value, which means it turns all of their impacts. The role of the ballot is to decide who has the best method for challenging the violence inherent in the status quo. Epistemically, the challenges to the status quo are meaningless if they don't rest on an understanding of a power that makes revolution possible. Only a focus on structural antagonisms produced by capitalism can lead to transformative politics. Number 9. Materialist critique aims at ending class war instead of focusing on micro practices, and materialist critique relates to those practices to the macro structures of capitalism and provides the knowledge necessary to put an end to exploitation. Materialist critique is fundamental to transformative politics. The role of the critique in pedagogy is exactly this: the production of historical knowledge and the class consciousness of the social relations knowledge and the market transformability of existing social arrangements and the possibility of a different social organization. The core of the pedagogy of critique is that education is not simply for enlightening the individual to see through the arbitrariness of a signification of the balance of established representations that recognize that it is a historical practice, and as such, it is always part of the larger forces of production and the relations of production. Burn. They say permeate, but the alt is mutually exclusive from this. The 1AC has a fundamentally different understanding of how power operates, which means that a combination fails to produce a revolutionary theory capable of challenging capitalism. And the perm isn't just some word that means we can agree with you. It's shorthand for a test of opportunity cost between the political choices here. If we win the 1AC failed to diagnose and address the problem, then you should no vote negative. Anything else and being negative being possible because they can use the vagueness of the 1AC advocacy to shift it, make any alt non-competitive. And all the links are dissets to the permutation and prove that the 1AC is incompatible with the alternative. If we win any of them, it proves the inclusion of the app makes a revolution impossible. I'll do the debate right now. The app method makes a movement against capitalism inevitable by obscuring the material base of capitalism versus the universalism link. Only a theory of power that enables a universal resistance can challenge the system of global capitalism that makes extinction inevitable. That's the 2-minute evidence. The 1AC understands power as asserted through language and superstructure. The 1AC insists that localized information can disrupt narratives and sides of resistance. This makes a challenge to the larger hegemonic structures of capitalism impossible by reducing politics to the fluid play of ideas, instead of a material struggle. And second link is the materialism link. The 1AC reduces politics to a series of language games. Psychological affirmation is presumed to be enough to evacuate the system. Material reality is ignored in favor of performative reading that situates itself in opposition to an ideology that perpetuates the status quo. This method reduces revolution to local resistance to differing systems of authority that makes true challenge impossible because it ignores the material base of capitalism. That's the Ebert evidence. And the 1AC affirmation of does nothing to change the material structures. Their critique fails to effectuate a larger resistance to capitalism. Cats. Attempts to conceptualize cultural shifts bring with Marxist assumptions regarding the predominance of an economic process and determining changes. The move away from determination by the economic external cultural critique impossible because the autonomy of culture removes any external standpoint from which one could theorize cultural products in relation to systemic contradiction. This provides an important service for ruling the cusp by updating dominant institutions and developing more simple and sophisticated modes of domination. Just the terrain political struggle from the social processes that is restrictivity to the destabilization of restrictive identities to the polarization of empowerment. Postmodernist attacks the notion of emancipation that result from the contestation between collective agencies produced by the contradictory process of material production. And the third link is the race war. Obviously, this splits the proletariat at masses, but the otherwise potent movements. Exactly this strategy used by capitalists. And economic exploitation is a better explanation for racism than racial antagonisms. Alexander 10. Only the past returns to European imperialism have people been classified among racial lines in America. Race emerges as a means of reconciling chattel slavery, the extermination of labor disease with the freedom of all. Once remained small indentured servitude was the dominant means of labor. Initially, blacks were not enslaved to exploitation. Expanded demand increased for labor and land. By demand for the land was meant by invading territory. Demand for labor was met through slavery. Indians were unsuitable because tribes were in a position to fight back. European immigrants were important. They were in short supply, and enslavement would interfere with the voluntary immigration to protect their status and economic position. The plantation shifted the strategy. Slaves were shipped from Africa. Slaves would be easier to control and less likely to form alliances with the poor whites. This planet class extended special privileges to poor whites to derive a wedge between them and slaves. Poor whites had a direct stake in race-based slavery, and now the example of black militancy is aiming to tear down the institution. It's non-responsive. The all debate. The alternative is to reject the 1AC in favor of historical materials. The only way to actualize any challenge to capitalism is to forefront a theory of power that can recognize the privacy of labor and the ways that capitalism structures social antagonism. Anything else only serves to humanize the system. That's the Tuna evidence. They say we can't explain class shifts. We can't. No reason that it was just rooted in racialized linguistics, but rather it's just conflict. The walkout evidence is not responsive. We don't pathologize certain understandings. We just say that there are better ways to conceptualize with capitalism. That it's distinct and concise arguments are necessary for movements to succeed. Your scholarship is depoliticizing doesn't account for the link between racism and neoliberalism. Norton 15. It would be tough to imagine a normative ideal that expresses more unambiguously the social position of the people who consider themselves candidates for inclusion, or at least significant staff positions in service to the ruling class, and no, neither overcome racism nor reject whiteness.
Part of whiteness.
We're gonna have 9/11. it's more.
Yeah.
What? Yeah.
Alan, you picked school yet?
How much do I grab water? Do you have one right now? Nice. $20. If I Venmo you, would you get one? If I Venmo you, would you send me one?
All I can out of the extras. Yeah. Sorry.
Wrong side of this.
You really want to graduate high school with a high school clothing thing?
They're nice.
Just get a Michigan one.
Were they made this year?
Yeah. We like custom design lots of fun.
Soldier?
Is he on the right side of the next one?
Definitely.
Someone's gonna have to.
Case, mid overview, but there's just case. The T page cap.
Are you starting with the overview stuff?
I am. It's actually kind of a lot on the overview page, and very little on the actual page, but whatever. Is anyone not good? The negative is in an awkward position because they have conceded there is a literal race war. We control uniqueness. We have a race war in 2019. Unlike post-civil rights liberals and the pendulum is swung alt-right, more than half of America put a white supremacist in the White House, and they've conceded every empiric like arson against black churches and extrajudicial killings and disappearances of dozens of black virgins protests prove black people are fighting for their lives. This means the role of the judge should be to the abolition of the white debate community. The ballot obviously cannot end the racist or racist press, which should not reward protocols of the intro debate that is allowed for tactics here. Second, you have dropped is a paradigmatic imperative for militancy in this room. There is too much at stake for black students. The total impact of dropping texting of the race war here is low intensity cultural genocide with black debate disinterest outweighs clash fairness and advocacy, which is an impact but an internal link to broader skills for militancy that trains us to be neutral about the high intensity of wars. Now, topicality at the top, the argument, refinement, and testing impact. Second line refinement exists in militant debates between the Panthers, the opacity of the Zaps, or institutionality of the Bull Harvards. Black debate like North Star and Lang Tech, who refine cultural clashes, predictable states that isn't neutral but draws a self-serving line to not anti-text to black fox to for their sensibilities. The 2NC said they aren't going to go for the dogma impact, so I'm not going to answer. Fairness and clash is the wolf table of manner. They have dropped this in, and it's an impact to all of their offense. We have a great piece of 2AC evidence that says that even if the TBA or reading on that solves the cultural and cultural disparity, the form requires blacks to, quote, accept less than ideal circumstances by avowing plantation rules for conduct when resisting. If debate is a microcosm of the race war, debate is not purely an intellectual exercise, and the plea to give non-blacks an equal playing field as anti-black. There are two warrants. First is hijacking dialogue. Even if they are well-intentioned, their models co-opted by white supremacists who come under the premise of engaging and having an equal opportunity to dialogue. They're like liberals who defend Richard Spencer's speaking engaged because you should get to present themselves even if they disagree. This neutrality is anti-black and enjoys the militarized presence of black debate. Second is superficial inclusion. Their model adds black people and serves to make debate arguments multicultural but keeps abhorrent curriculums that are predictable to non-black research agendas. They're obscure the vibrant third-like testing of debates in the militant black tradition, which stereotypes anti-black or blacks as anti-intellectual. Also, a frame for all of their offense that if there is a race war, the content of our discussion literally matters, which means that even if they create a good process of skills or testing, it means that militancy should be discussion of that texting, which their interpretation excludes. Topicality is not a
prior question in debate is not a game. If it's a microcosm of what's outside, you should put the procedure of the internal debate on over immigration policy adjustments on timeout. If we win or just go through there is a race war in which we have, since they have dropped it and agreed with it. You should evaluating clash is an intrinsic good for every player is how non-blacks present themselves, having the best intention for all lives to keep antagonism of the day, which is bad. They say advocacy seals. They've dropped an argument from the case that says militancy is a prerequisite for legal appeals or making advocacy outside. Mississippi proves civil rights lawyering could be wiped out by armed clan members without black militant militias that accompany them in law rooms, persuasion through rational means of policy fails because there are assumed moral questions. Fiat also doesn't teach skills because it just makes you fiat pass legal barriers. The ballot broader scope argument, this does not matter when we have a broader scope of solving a debate. The refugee and border TVA, they're both bad. Every turn proves we should end the protocols of the internal debate over immigration during the race war. Even if they include curriculum about black immigrants, they prove the form of their standards ostracizes black militants, which is bad. We should not compromise the debate community during the race war. Also, their TVAs don't meet their interpretation. It's literally effects and extra-topicality, which doesn't solve any of the offense. They also do not allow for the have to say militancy as a method, which means that they force compromise of the race war, which is also bad. The T page regularly, most of the truancy is not good at answering the bottom of the page, and most of it's irrelevant. The civil enemy profiling turn is also basically drop. It's not surveillance bad. It's your model creates the death and targeting of black vote debates, imports the rules engaged about the race war by profiling black and extremists that threaten to political terms of refined debate, which is also problematic. The counter-information is not unpredictable. If there is a race war, you should be willing to give up unpredictability if our arguments are true. Also, apps are limited to militancy against the internal debate of illegal immigration. The race war is a matter of life and death for debaters to cover, which means it doesn't matter if predictability is good. A model that assumes equality between sides is disruption evaluation that disarms the oppressed and encourages neutrality in spaces like debate. Cap K.
It's just like ballot. It's about models of debate.
It's the ballot's relevant. It's about models of debate. That's also stupid. Cap K. Capitalism does not structure the race war, and getting rid of capitalism will not solve police shooting black people or Trump pick President, etc. The role of ballot cannot be theirs when you've conceded that the role of the judge on cases to abolish the white debate community, which filters and precedes the role of the ballot. Permutation to both. Their answers suck. It doesn't sever. Our evidence is so good on this question. There's no trade-off between black militancy and the alternative examples of historical materialism that can occur at the same time. There's no explanation. History proves that material collectives like the Revolutionary Action Movement or Panthers made linkages with Chairman Mao to theorize arming global revolutions, which can be made for a violent revolution that makes the materialism better. Yes, we get a perm during the race war. That's our interpretation. Anything leads to bad plan debate speech where the neg always wins. The universalism link is about language. It's an awful. We have a universal collective around fighting the race war. If you can't get down with it, then the alt would be racist anyways, which is our offensive argument since Highland Park is on the wrong side of the race war. The materialism link, we are material. They dropped that. We call for tactics and fighting in the street, and they dropped examples of militancy that are productive and good for the revolution, which we conceded. They say the race war spirit splits the proletariat. This is kind of our argument that they're on the other side of the race war, and it's like, oh, you would cause clashes between white and black people. Well, that's kind of our argument, and the status quo, the alt obviously does not solve the case or capitalism because they've conceded that cannot explain race war debate, clash of civilizations, calling me a cheater, or any of the stuff about pathologizing black debaters, which proves that it's life and death for black people.
You have 233, right?
Oh, okay.
We have 615.
Okay, starting.
Okay.
Would you like some?
Oh yeah, you can't touch that. Mine's just bad. This is not mine also. It's like assorted greens. Fuck off. I'm not here. Take the syrup.
But Connor, do you want to watch him?
Yeah.
He does.
Oh,
Because
cool.
he broke my heart and decided not to put it in college.
That's okay. You can still be involved with the debate, and you'll hear from me soon about it.
I miss him every day.
Sorry.
Bye, Connor.
Bye.
Oh, poor Connor. She'll want to make sure. I the same OCD now.
A lot of new debate stuff. He was and he's a person. He's like that stupid.
That's bullshit.
Right?
It is like perfectly situated. It's like Northwestern circa 90s. Not impossible to get into, but still high reputation.
That's my question's dropping out. Don't forget it.
Yeah.
It's a bigger profession. That they have no idea.
It's whatever everything there is runs into one of the excuse me, Bayer. What's his major in like career goals?
He does not want to be a lawyer and he just like a big like that. Published the cool thing.
Alright. T. Is anyone not ready?
Yes.
What do I mean?
Sorry.
You're fine. It's not your fault that I'm eating while you're supposed to be doing this.
Cool. Interpretation: the affirmative should endorse instrumental evaluation of USFG action. Limited topics are key to iterative testing, which turns militancy to warrants. First is research. We learn how to identify the best strategies, and then we can take those strategies and actualize them in the real world, which is significantly more important than affirming their limited advocacy in this round, and best accomplishes the objectives inherent to the AF, which also impact turns the role of the ballot. The second is contestation. Prepared opponents who are able to engage in negotiated stasis, simulate real-world opposition, and encourage reflexivity in third and fourth level testing at an extremely high level. Plus, there's external offense. Clash is an inherent good. It's proven by judges' investment in the burden of rejoinder and the way you're going to evaluate this round, which means that as long as we have mitigation and prove that our interpretation is not incompatible with militancy, you can vote for us. The line by line. The first argument about clash being inevitable or second level testing being inevitable, yes, all debates, the vast majority of debates have clash, but our argument is that clash is linear and that a stasis point maximizes it, which net link turns all of their offense. We've specifically articulated why researching and discussing the resolution is net good and results in the best actualization of their political strategy and their orientation towards the race war. The next argument is about why you should reject the TVA even if it solves this. Is not true. They provide two warrants. The first is about hijacking, but this was established in cross-sex. The clash allows us to discern the truest arguments, and the institutional culture of debate means that will lead debaters to conclude that we should help accentuate their strategy if they're correct that that strategy is the best. Plus, people will be racist inevitably. That's not a reason why you should deny people skills to partake in the revolution or make debate as bad as possible. Plus, there's no reason why their method can't be co-opted. The next argument is the unpredictability. That our interpretation is unpredictable because there's a race war going on now. But you've dropped that our interpretation isn't exclusive with a discussion of the race war. Rather, this discussion has to be oriented around a change in USFG policy towards immigration. The next argument about how we exclude militant strategies, it hasn't been substantiated. There's no reason why militancy and the skills associated with militancy and that general attitude towards institutions is incompatible with defending a plan. The next argument about how it's sort of a timeout and T is a microcosm. Our argument is that if we leverage T as a norm, it link turns this argument because it allows us to best participate in the good side of the race war and prevent bad people from causing all kinds of violence and change negative practices within this community, which is net better. The next argument is that assuming that clash is an inherent good, is bad, but that's not true. One, we've substantiated the fact that they assume that Clash is good. It's inherent in participating in the activity, and the second is that we've substantiated reasons why Clash is net good for combating majoritarian oppression. The next argument is just an assertion that militancy is key to advocacy skills, but our argument is that stasis is key to militancy, which is key to advocacy skills, which internal link turns all of this analysis. We have warrants, they do not. Don't allow for extrapolation. They say that fiat doesn't solve because we go past barriers. One, content is irrelevant. It's the process of clash and contestation that allows us to then learn about militancy and the best way to actualize those skills in the future. Second, yes, it does. The TVA necessarily allows us to learn about militancy and the requisite skills to forward the revolution. Their turns to it are one that we can't talk about the form that they think is good, i.e. militancy, but that's certainly not true. Militancy as a justification for the introduction of the plan, which is just a prescriptive statement about the world, i.e. the way the world should look. And the second is that they say that our TVAs don't meet our interpretation. They say their effects and extratropical. They provide no warrants for why that's true. You endorse a change in USFG action, and then you read scholarship advantages predicated on endorsing that change. And then they make a bunch of assertions about the fact that it's compromising during the race war. We've proven that endorsing T as a norm is net better for forwarding the objectives of the race war, which proves it's the opposite of a compromise with white institutions. Rather, it's leveraging them against themselves, which is not good. The profiling turn argument, there's no warrant for why it links to our interpretation. We don't say that we should purge people who don't participate in refined debate. Rather, we say we should engage in a deliberative discussion about what is best. The next argument about the counterinterpretation, we've impact turned it. We think that we access their arguments better by having a predictable stasis, which necessarily results in best participating in the race war and forwarding the objectives that they've identified. The counterinterpretation doesn't solve any of our offense flaws. The TVA proves that we can incorporate theirs.
We have 6:15.
so resentful about children and like I get it, it's exhausting. What if we like interacted with each other and did the things that make sitting over with other people pleasant? And I think that the idea that you're just like obligated to accept yourself, not sexualize. Could be fun. I'm all for maximize fun at the expense of urgency.
I'll be replaced by a robot.
I asked a very broad question. Tell me about your job. Just like what do you do when you like at it? What is a librarian do like for a day?
Case T. Okay, is anyone not good? For the fourth time, they can see that there's a literal race war. We're winning. This means that the race war is threatening to be participants that seeps into this community. They've conceded in 3 speeches that you have, quote, a paradigmatic imperative to resolve this violence prior to the demand for black students to follow the protocols of the internal debate over immigration. Every empiric of the race war is dropped. Extrajudicial killings of Ferguson protesters, the alt-right seizing control of the White House are mimicked in the debate community that uses procedural protocols to profile and ostracize black identity extremists who don't politic within shared parameters. That means the role of the judge is to abolish the like debate community that poses a real danger to white participants or to black participants. That was conceded. If we win a risk of a link or an impact to topicality, that means fairness isn't an impact in the face of low intensity cultural violence inflicted here to protect the interests of multicultural white supremacy in debate that prevents black participants from gaining the benefits of their model. Topicality at the top. This is the debate is not just a competition, but a microcosm of the waste where Highland Park is guilty of protecting white interests while preserving themselves as having the best intentions to keep black antagonisms at bay. Topicality is not a prior question because the procedure of internal debate over immigration policy adjustment should be put on time out during the race where they have conceded that clash is an intrinsic good, is all lives matter logic that presumes all players should have a role because everyone comes to the table with a shared values while preserving despite disagreements over the purpose of the debate. This logic ostracizes the black radical tradition presumed to be playing in bad faith. The cut and run from the topic, the limelight. Their negative is in a really bad spot when all of their impact arguments are just about solving the race war better, but they have conceded all the case arguments that we are the only way to do that because we affirm militancy. All of their research and contestation arguments, normally this sounds ridiculous, but the counter
counterinterpretation actually solves all their impacts better because the way that they explain research and contestations is in the context of solving the race war. The counterinterpretation literally forces debates to be about militancy, which means that only the clash and refinement that occurs is about militancy. Especially true given that it's a matter of life and death for black folks. We solve research and testing because the 1AC evidence says that there's vibrancy in militancy debates. For example, defending different revolutions like the Zapatistas versus the Panthers, or just defending opacity, which means that we allow for sort of that contestation. They say that clash is an inherent good. This is another time when they haven't answered the Hawthorne evidence. You should definitely read it after this debate. It's the best card on this page. They could win the topical versus the after any sort of. They include our motto. They include race war arguments and that they solve the curriculum of racial disparity. But the form of their motto requires black students to accept the quote accept less than ideal circumstances by avowing procedural rules of content when resisting. That's also our Farley evidence. If debate is a microcosm of the race war, debate is not purely an intellectual exercise, and the plea for non-black students to have an equal playing field is complicit in establishing killing fields. That's a Hawthorne evidence. There are two warrants that are conceded. First, hijacking dialogue. Even if Highland Park wins, they have well-intentioned definitions of their model. Their model is co-opted by white supremacists who come under the premise of having an equal opportunity to dialogue. They're like liberals who defend Richard Spencer's speaking engagements because he should get to present himself. Even if we disagree, this neutrality ignores the militarized presence of non-black people in liberal spaces like debate, which causes violence and impact. It re-entrenches the 1AC impact. Second, they've conceded that this is superficial inclusion. Their model of debate adds black people and stirs to make debate about arguments multicultural, but keeps adverse curriculums that are predictable to non-black researchers. And as they obscure vibrant testing and militant debates to characterize black students as anti-intellectual, they say that clash is an inherent good. There's no reason why discussing immigration is good in the tunar. They just say clash is good. Our model would obviously solve that. They say that clash leads to the truest argument. This is weird. When their sort of clash that they would prescribe under their model, they would not be centered on the race war and lead to sort of compromise over the way that black students engage. There's no warrant for their co-option argument. They say that our interpretation solves discussion. No, it does not. They force that the USFG has to reduce restriction, which means that military apps would not would be excluded from the topic. They said that they can see that it's bad to force black students to sort of leave the race war at the door, which their interpretation would do by forcing them to have to defend the USFG, which isn't compatible with militancy. They say that they also don't have a read on the neg argument, and militancy is in opposition to the state, so there's no reason that you could do it. But with the USFG, the T-link turn argument makes zero sense, especially when they're on the wrong side of the race war. They say stasis is key to militancy. We are the only ones who have a stasis for militancy because we force debates to be about militancy. They say the content is irrelevant. They drop from the one era that the content does matter because the race war means that black people are fighting for their lives, and their sort of disembodied approach to the topic is dangerous for black students who have to navigate and learn the skills to engage. The topical version, first of all, was not explain what the TVA is in the 2NR. You should hold them for a high bar to explain how they allow for our model, for our arguments under their model. The first argument that they conceded is compromise, which proves that they force black students to check the race war at the door and defend institutions that are opposed to militancy. Second, they concede that there's no method to enforce militancy. The 2NC TVA was open borders. How is this militancy? They say you could read it as an advantage, but that doesn't make any sense. Also, all of our critiques of topicality obviously come first. There aren't really any valid arguments, so they've just conceded that our model debate teaches the necessary skills for militancy because we teach students to sort of have that clash and iterative testing. All of their overview arguments at the top prove that our model actually creates the skills for black students to engage in the race war because it creates that form of advocacy. They just have no reason why inclusion of their advocacy is good. The Hawthorne evidence is just so much better than every card that they read, and it's literally saying that their model debate makes debate dangerous for black people. If we win that there's a race war, it means that we need to change the state of the debate. All of the case arguments were conceded. Will of the judge is to abolish the left.
Congratulations to both sides. This was an awesome debate. You made it very far into this tournament. You should be exceedingly proud of yourself. The decision is a 3-0 for the affirmative from North Carolina. I'm happy to talk because I love to do it.
Go.
I would just like to say this 2NC was awesome. And I said that last round too, so anyone who heard me say it will think that's disingenuous, but you gave, by a landslide, the best 2NC I've heard a student give on framework in a high school debate in a long fucking time. And you should be very pleased with yourself because it demonstrated something I think is difficult to accomplish, which is this like sort of intellectual maturity to see debates from a bird's eye view, and you did that well. And you should know that your speeches were very, very good. That being said, the way I evaluated the debate is that I think that the lack of external impacts to clash and iterative testing of the 2NR are difficult for you because of what the 2AR identifies as a strategy that ultimately seems like a counterplan that solves better without a net benefit, as a sort of analogy to describe to you how I understood it. And in theory, while I agree with this sort of approach to debating framework and you're winning a lot of defense that is valuable if you have an external impact, I believe their interpretation ultimately facilitates comparably better discussions for us to learn about how to be on the right side of the race war correctly, which everyone has kind of identified as the ultimate utility to what debate will facilitate, absent there being an external impact to clash that says those skills should or can be applied differently. They heard me say this last debate, but there's this thing that's very important to do, I think, in all sort of clash debates, but in particular ones about framework, which is identify, like, what is the single thing that we have to be right about for the rest of the stuff we come into play. And you actually identify this in the 2NR in a way that I thought was quite correct and meaningful, which is if you win, that sort of sequentially, the skills that are developed through the process of debating over a plan that gets refined and then, attacked by the negative and then attacked differently the next time, if those skills are more effective at making us prepared to engage with people who are confrontational, then as long as you win, that only your interpretation does that better, you have the solves better argument. The thing that I think is difficult for you is that the 2AR's gesture that is like, in our interpretation, there would be tons of clash because the only thing people would debate is in fact the race war. Because our interp was like, put everything on pause, it's just this shit. I don't know why that interpretation doesn't solve equally well to facilitate that outcome. And I think they're two, perhaps they're like kind of underexplained. But I think that they're better substantiated than I sometimes feel about these like internal link arguments that we still never like talking about, whatever, no one cares except for me, I get that. But the two arguments I think that make me feel uncomfortable with the sort of residual risk that your intentions are perhaps pure but perhaps not useful, are the argument about hijacking. The 2NR's answer to this I don't think helps a ton, and perhaps it's because you all could more, and I guess this works to your benefit, but there's a little bit of obfuscation about what this means. You're just like, it would get hijacked. Like how? I interpret this argument to mean the debate gives everyone skills so that if your agenda is malicious and like you're a white supremacist, to create those skills enables you to take debate and translate it into something malicious eventually. If that's not what you meant, then I guess that worked to your benefit. But you're kind of just like, well, that's not going to happen because clash would solve that. I think that's weird because I have a hard time articulating what like piece of logic or true statement would make that the case, and the idea that over time it would be revealed to us that like racists are wrong is not self-evident, particularly if they're correct about the sort of status of who controls the monopoly on like where is power directing the race war in the status quo, and they've said like the vast majority of resources are allocated amongst white people who are on the wrong side of the race war. I don't know why it is the case that iterative testing reveals it to be more true to racists that they are wrong. And absent thinking that, I don't understand the you solve it argument. So there's a link to your interpretation as to why it makes us worse off in learning to advocate for revolution towards the race war. And I don't think you have a defensive argument about either the TVA or read it on the negative solves. The second is this argument about affirming institutional bodies as something that's like just inherently not compatible with a revolution on the right side of a race war. This is like, again, a little on the like, we're playing with fire on what are we saying in the 1AR depth category of like, it's there, it's certainly there enough, it becomes more elaborated than the 2AR, like extra force stuff in the 1AR wouldn't kill anybody. But I do think you need an answer to it. It's just like, the types of debates that happen over topical plans that would not be about the race war and the sort of topical version you illustrated as potential of solving some of their offense is like, actually probably most of their offense, like those debates eventually require people to take up positions that could convince them to be on the wrong side. There is an educational discussion that we would leave with the wrong impression from because it had not introduced the content and it had relied on a form of advocacy that distances people from the question of like, is it ethical to advocate for the USFG or not? And again, like a little bit more on the 2AR and the 1AR, but I do think this is a 1AR argument. Your answer to is sort of still reliant on the idea that over iterative idea testing processes, we come to the truth. As an aside, you all should make this argument, and I'm surprised sometimes when teams don't, but the idea that like iteration creates truth and like truth equals the moral truth is something I've never understood the like intuitive internal link to. Like people have come to things that they believe like very deeply are logically defensible, the most well-founded, that are repugnant moral beliefs. And you could even, I think, gesture towards like the inclination for judges to default to utilitarian comparisons of impact, to say that an iteration of policy debates could lead you to believe that it is an absolutely ethical choice to sacrifice 10 black kids to save 100. Like, util unquestioned would potentially teach you that. You wouldn't necessarily come to that conclusion, but you also wouldn't necessarily not come to that conclusion. Which is why the idea that just repetition itself reveals ethical truths is something you should push against, while also making arguments about why the sort of monopoly that like white knowledge has in academic discussions is less likely to reveal those truths self-evident, even if they are repeated and rehashed. The last thing I'll say, I'm sorry, I talk a lot, is that this neg argument about the neg argument I found myself thinking about the longest that I think is quite interesting is this one that's like, basically we create better sparring partners so that when you encounter the people who are like really militantly invested in the race war, even if we say it's not us, you will have been better off if the opponents in debate spent hours and hours and hours trying to basically gesture those prepared opponents who militantly disagree with you. I didn't know why their interpretation doesn't solve it. And I think if you can make a better argument about why that's the case, I don't know what your answer to this is. I mean, like, it is that your interp solves it. Yeah. But I think that that's clever, frankly. And it's a good way of describing sort of what the value of a well-prepared opponent is that there are people far more insidious for lots of us who we are likely to encounter in life than the people we do in debate, and that if adopting the role of like as prepared to defend the opposite of what you want as possible is what your interp facilitates, that's good. The last thing I'll say, if you wanted, is that the best way, I think, to make these arguments so that this like we fiat and our interp stuff doesn't matter is to literally just make the arguments. It's like, we don't fucking fiat interpretations. Our argument is that if we win on topicality, there is a competitive incentive that dictates behavior. Teams don't want to just show up and lose and lose and lose, which means the norm of voting for topicality is in fact one that is dictatorial of the behaviors that precede it, which is the reason our interpretation solves our offense about what type of debates happen. They don't get to speak into existence that only their interpretation would happen. If you're correct about competitive incentive and it being something that dictates behavior, then you would never just read debates under that interpretation. You would continue to proliferate affirmatives under multiple interpretations outside the resolution, which is why the limits internal link is true. It's just sort of lost by the end of this debate, which is why the 2AR thing to say like our interp solves is compelling to me, because you don't have the internal link argument necessary to disprove that. Okay, I'm sorry, that was a lot of uninterrupted talking, but good job.
I'm so glad she went first. And you did a lot of talking. I'll add a few brief things. I really, again, enjoyed this debate as well. Created a lot of rich argument and thought. 2 and C was elegant. It was good. I felt like the 2AC and 1AR were catching up on everything the 1AC had. And I still feel like we have a long way to go to maybe explain things like what is militant research and why does their interpretation not access in specific ways. It's a strange thing that the advocacy is kind of an assertion of a reality. And I hesitate to make analogies because I honestly will admit I don't know anything. I haven't read a lot about tons of stuff. Let's say the analogy is we're having a warming debate, but everyone has to debate as if global warming doesn't exist. So like, I think that I'm not saying that I think that anything that's been asserted isn't true, but imagine a hypothetical, which is what the 2 and C and 2R are. They're all about the potential of debate. Imagine a hypothetical where everything is contestable except one truth. And then think about how politics would be shaped by that. And I think that shaped how I evaluated kind of what was happening in the debate. I wrote out an RFD that was kind of exactly what she said. And I can go over some of it, but a few things in the 1AR, 2AR, this argument that basically you can have lawyers, but you need people to, in the race war, support them, was good, and I thought could have been more than 2AR. This stuff about only militants can rebel against the USFG, so their interpretation has to exclude them too. But I think both those arguments are good. Great job.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any disagreements in substance. I think that I will treat it like a warming debate, kind of thing, but it's, I think that there's two fundamental sort of problems. One is the sort of uniqueness difficulty, which is that, in the 2AR, I think, and the 1AR both correctly identify this, that the race war is ongoing. It's underway, it's huge. Point out some examples, I think, that are salient to me in particular, the deaths of Ferguson protesters under suspicious circumstances around St. Louis and whatnot, which continued as recently as 2 weeks ago and stuff. Sort of things like that. But I think the argument that's most important to me in this debate in terms of making me sort of being kind of on board to accept this notion is the idea that the claim that you didn't use the word infiltration, but I'm going to use the word anyway, infiltration into debate, basically, that these sort of same things spill over, and while they may not necessarily become manifest in debate in literal extrajudicial killings, that nonetheless these sorts of things are happening. As a result, two things are true. Number one, it frames a sort of try or die kind of question here where sort of destruction of debate is net desirable versus attempting to sort of recover these sorts of things. This is difficult for the counter-interpretation debate. If the counter-interpretation is capable of capturing most, if not all, of the offense that the iterations and those sorts of things, the skills generate, then I think the external impact of gotta fight the Klan that's coming into debate sort of arguments become, I think, a significant net benefit to the counter-interpretation vis-a-vis the interpretation. That's the sort of short version. I think the ways to do this, I want to begin, I want to echo what Kristen began with, which was some sort of external offense beyond these sort of internal link turns and sort of truth testing arguments would be good. I think there are some simple ones just to, hey, let's talk about immigration. Another one that maybe I have a personal attachment to, but to other sorts of things that the sort of, that there's certain value to certain types of content that's either intrinsic to the content or subject matter of the resolution or to the resolutional process and sort of existence of it. The second way that you could potentially get to, I think, sort of powering up those arguments is arguing for, there's a moment in cross-ex of the 2AC when there's the, one's a procedure, one's a rule, kind of thing like that. And I find the distinction between the resolution as procedure versus time as rule to be thin at best, and one that could be explored, I think, a lot more could be usefully explored continuing down that kind of thing like that. Well, is it really? Because all the other formats that are happening in this building have different times, and they also have different resolutions and those sorts of things, but they all have resolutions and have times. So what's procedure, what's norm, which one's meaningful, which one's transcendental versus contingent on these sorts of things, kind of pushing some of those things out. For the app, I think did a very good job. I think this is as well as you've debated in front of me in terms of the sort of cohesiveness and intelligence, which is not to say you haven't debated well in front of me before. I think one thing that I mentioned before that I really, there's the, both in the 1AC and the beginning of the 2AC is the framing device. There's a citation of Mary, don't you weep. That's the God gave Noah the rainbow sign, no more water line. Didn't mean to rhyme on purpose there. Anyway, it's the quote that frames fire next time, obviously. Use that more. It's a great framing device. It's obviously the sort of subject matter. It's the entire question, right? And I think using that as a sort of mental framing device, especially as a heuristic that might work on your judges, which is, we are not saying we are here to kill everyone. Our argument is that the war is upon us. We didn't pick it, but we are not surrendering. Basic argument, which I think in some, this is what Baldwin obviously does a very nice job sort of building, kind of thing like that. And I just, I like that. I like that literature. I like them books. That's it. I will stop. I'm sure you'd like to prep. Best of luck to you. Great job. I concur that the 2NC was fantastic.
Yeah, coming against a 1AC like that.
Thank you all for judging.
Is there anything else? Is there any questions we can answer? Anything, or do y'all just want to eat and whatever?
I mean, I do want to do that.
You have my email, right?
Yeah.
Feel free.
I also use as many words and say as few things on email, and I assure you I will do that.
Yeah.
Thank y'all.
Yeah. So yeah, hit me up. Y'all want to get in touch. Everything. Good luck.
Thank you.
Oh, cool. I couldn't find it. You couldn't.